Hello and welcome to the July Look-See. We are living in exciting times, aren't we? Yeah, there's some distressing things, but lots and lots of changes are occurring. And my focus this month was mostly a wide-ranging look at what's happening in various countries, especially India, as well as natural disasters and how we're doing as a world, what's going on in our world. So let's begin. When I asked for a keyword for the next 4 or 5 weeks, I got the term punch list. This was an unexpected but familiar term usually used in construction projects. After thinking about it for a bit, I wondered if it's suggesting that a cleanup is in progress. When a big project is nearing completion, the building contractor and the building inspector go through the site and write down all the final details that must be completed or corrected in order for the contractor to get paid. Now, if I imagine that the big project is the freeing of the US from the British system of law, the Federal Reserve system of finance, and the corporate system of control, then the idea of a punch list says that the job is mostly done, but there are some details left to handle. The punch list generally looks at the finer details having to do with repairs of anything that might have been damaged during the project, making sure that basic systems of electric, water, and HVAC are back online and working as they should, and replacement or repair of anything that isn't working or anything that needs to be finished. A national or global punch list could be overwhelming. What if it included repairs to do anything damaged? Would that mean something will be done to repair the damage done to hearts and minds of millions of people during COVID? What if it included checking electrical systems? Would that be a hint that there are new forms of energy coming online? What about water supplies? Could they reestablish water to the Southwest US? They're running out down there. Since water is the symbol of emotion, could they create emotional equilibrium in people? And how about HVAC? Might that mean that government will be working to improve the basic comfort level of the population? All of the above assumes that the people are passive recipients of the above improvements. But what if we were the inspector telling the government, the financial system, and the corporate system what they needed to do? Or even more shocking, what if we turned the whole punch list question around and discovered we were the contractors and we were the ones responsible for finishing the punch list? Think about that. So now let's look and see what's happening in our world and what's coming at us. Number one, we've had some terribly disappointing decisions by the Supreme Court lately, but a couple of decisions were a big relief. One allows President Trump to fire people in the agencies, sometimes called the deep state agencies, and he will probably not waste any time doing so. The other decision was the Supreme Court's ruling that limits the fees that banks can charge anyone over the age of 60. People over 60 have worked and saved all their lives, putting money into savings, only to have the banks begin quietly siphoning money from those savings by charging a variety of fees. Those fees, called fee harvesting, allowed banks to collect billions of dollars every year. And banks quickly became reliant on those billions. However, 7 types of fees are now illegal, and you can ask for your money back. First, banks can no longer charge fees for paper statements, even though banks claim they want to save the environment. The truth is that they want to save paper, printing, and postage costs and shift those costs onto the people. At what point did banks forget that it costs money to be in business? It's not all roses and profits for your pocket. Second, banks can no longer add a hidden surcharge for transactions between you and a teller inside the bank. They want you to use the mobile app or the ATM so they can get rid of tellers. Third, fees for dormant accounts are now illegal. When you put money in an account for a grandchild, a nest egg, or a child's college education and leave it there in order to build up a good balance for the future, banks cannot begin quietly draining the account using dormancy fees just because there are no transactions taking place. Fourth, banks can no longer charge a minimum balance fee if the balance drops because you had a medical emergency and took all the money out to pay the medical costs. The fifth fee is known as the federal benefits overdraft trap. Federal benefits overdraft trap. Many older Americans depend heavily on Social Security checks that arrive on a very specific schedule. Some of those Americans have also set up automatic payments from their bank accounts based on the date the Social Security check will arrive. But if there's a holiday and the Social Security check arrives a day or two late, causing the payment to arrive the same day as the automatic payment is scheduled, the banks would go ahead and process payments in the morning, then charge overdraft fees for every transaction they put through, even though they knew the Social Security check was coming later that day. The Supreme Court said no more. Banks know that the check is coming, that it is delayed because of a holiday or a weekend, and they cannot charge any overdraft fees by sending the automatic payments 8 hours earlier than the deposit is registered. Number 6, banks can no longer charge money to trace a wire or start a fraud investigation if a wire turns out to be fraudulent. Banks have a statutory obligation to investigate financial fraud. That's their business. They cannot view this fraud as not my problem or as a financial opportunity to make a few bucks. Wow. And lastly, banks can no longer charge estate processing fees when someone dies and the estate or the heirs go to close out the account. The funds must be transferred to the estate or the heirs without any taxes or fees applied by the financial institution. Now, banks argued, saying that estate processing is highly technical. It requires a whole legal team to review it. But the court said, death is not a voluntary transaction, and banks cannot charge an exit fee for the end of a human life. Now, banks argued all of these points heavily, saying that if people didn't like the fees, they could go elsewhere. And I laughed out loud when I heard the court's response. The court said, the free market is an illusion. Whoa, the free market is an illusion, especially when all the banks collude to enforce the predatory fees. Therefore, there's nowhere else to go. Wow. It's been a long time since any court has stood up for us, the people. In closing, the warning here is that banks have built vast architectural financial models based entirely on this fee-based revenue stream that has just been shut off. This has created a big hole, massive hole in their quarterly earnings, and they will probably try to create new fees with new names, calling them administrative adjustments or security enhancement protocols or whatever. I think we should pay attention. Number 2, it looks like China has made a stunning energy breakthrough that moves past oil, past all drilling problems, refinery issues, tanker problems, storage challenges, logistics issues, rare earth metal shortages, and problems of how to get a tanker full of oil through either the Strait of Malacca, the Strait of Hormuz, around the Horn of Africa, or through a pipeline that runs through enemy territory. China has been playing with hydrogen. They have been researching what all can be done with hydrogen, and they have found a way to produce fuel, jet fuel no less, from air and water. First, they pull carbon dioxide straight out of the atmosphere. Then they use solar power to split hydrogen away from water, H2O. They set those two hydrogen free. Then they combine the carbon dioxide with the hydrogen, add a little electricity, and the result is liquid jet fuel with the same molecules and the same chemistry as what comes out of the ground and the refinery. China is expecting to produce over 1 billion gallons of this new renewable fuel this year alone. They are producing jet fuel right where it is going to be used. And that's not all they're doing. They have figured out a way to store liquid air. Liquid air, super cooled air turns to a liquid. And they're storing it in the desert of all places. And then they use it to produce enough energy to run an entire electrical grid. They freeze it every morning and they let it warm up every night. When it warms up, it expands like 750 times, and it runs a whole bunch of turbines that runs a whole electrical grid. Wow. They have also learned how to use artificial photosynthesis to turn carbon dioxide into industrial chemicals. Wow, industrial chemicals are a huge part of the supply chains of the world. They're using a solar ammonia plant to produce liquid nitrogen. And they're using that liquid nitrogen to make fertilizer. Sometimes it's used in cryogenic medical procedures and many other industrial uses. Renewable jet fuel, liquid air storage, artificial photosynthesis, and solar ammonia all share one trait. They are not limited to where the resource is buried. They only care where the machine is built. And China is building all the machines. What will change in our world as a result? Ports, shipping, shipbuilding, pipelines, storage facilities, whole logistics companies, shipping insurance, leverage, and power dynamics among countries, to name just a few. The age of geological energy is over. We're moving into the age of being able to use space as our resource. The era in which power followed geology is done. If fuel can be manufactured anywhere using air, water, and electricity, then geography stops being power. Doesn't matter what's in the ground under your feet. Heads up, Saudi Arabia and Texas and Alaska and Venezuela and Iran, and that would include any other country using oil to leverage their power and as the base of their economy. These four developments constitute a step into the new earth that we have been looking forward to for a very long time. Number 3, I'm sure you have heard this already, but I bring it up because I want to highlight something important that began with Elon Musk and ended with Larry Page. Larry left California when the state decided to take 5% of everything he owned starting January 1st, 2026. This tax the rich measure was the brainchild of the SEIU, United Healthcare Workers West. They are allegedly a labor union of healthcare workers who push for fair wages, better working conditions, and patients' rights. However, they spend most of their money advocating liberal political and ballot initiatives. Their push to confiscate 5% of everything owned by the wealthy should not be a big surprise, because this attitude is very similar to the attitude the communists used to push. In the communist ideology, no one owned anything. And I would add, no one was happy. And the state was allowed to leech everything from whomever they could entrap in their system. They then pretended, oh, it's for the good of all. But the reality was that they put most of the money into their own pockets and the pockets of whomever they could get to help them enforce this system of leeches and liars. The decision to take 5% of what people own is not even a tax. It's just blatant thievery. Everyone is squeezing everyone else, trying to take a bite out of whatever success others have achieved. What gives rise to this kind of greed? A lot of it is the dog-eat-dog world of those who do not feel secure no matter how much they have. This insecurity is made worse by the knowledge that there are shysters and con men in positions of power. No one can feel settled or safe or secure when men who cannot be trusted are at the wheel. Ronald Reagan often talked about the trickle-down effect of having more money floating around in the system, but in reality, the only thing that ever trickles down is attitude. People who are corrupt broadcast a field of corrupted energy wherever they go. And ordinary people pick this up at the intuitive level, especially the young people. Youth are naturally somewhat liberal. Age teaches you to be a little more conservative. You learn that not everything works the way you think it could or should. Wisdom provides the bridge between liberal and conservative perspectives, and every one of us should hold a little of each perspective. Civilization cannot evolve much if liberalism is rampant, because it's a one step forward and 2 or 3 steps back. On the other hand, civilization cannot evolve at all if conservatism has everything locked in a box. Neither should become a blanket opinion. When people are squeezing one another for every dime and dollar and every advantage they can scavenge, things are out of balance. It's time we made an effort to rebuild security and trust in ourselves and in one another. The system will follow. Number 4, Mercury retrograde is in full swing. And I'm pretty sure the big difficulty of this period is not going to be an obvious financial crash. It's going to be the inability of people to get their hands on their money. It looks like nothing really crashes or collapses, but nothing is working. And in the midst of a heat wave, everything freezes. Number 5, Earth changes appear to be cascading into one another these days as our solar system pushes through the current sheet, the galactic current sheet. A lot of people think HAARP is the culprit behind the heat, the earthquakes, the droughts, the storms, and the other natural disasters, but what's happening is far beyond what HAARP can do. And there's even some talk that HAARP is actually trying to counter some of the electronic weather control that is being used. That said, there's always a fire, a forest fire burning somewhere, and fires look like they will be more dangerous than usual over this summer. Be careful. The droughts and heat in the Southwest USA and in Spain, France, Portugal, Italy, and Austria are about to feed what may later be seen as a holocaust of fires over the next couple of months. Tornado Alley seems to have moved north to cut across Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, as well as Michigan, where I live, in Southwest Michigan. Here, there would be a tornado watch, maybe for a few hours, once or twice a year. But this year, we've had serious storms bringing actual tornadoes that swirled by all around 2 or 3 times this season, missing us, thank God. So twin earthquakes in Venezuela created a shocking disaster. And what was revealed about the construction of many buildings was so much worse. Some of the buildings had no rebar in the concrete to strengthen it and keep it from collapsing. What was thought to be concrete in other buildings turned out to be a styrofoam-like substance with a thin concrete coating. People were breaking up that styrofoam wall or walls with their bare hands to try to get at the people buried underneath. It was so sad. The earth is never still, and there are little quakes and shakes happening all the time. And there have been some major earthquakes in Japan and California, but I see a few more major shakeups in Alaska, the Caribbean, Turkey, Greece, northern Italy, Chile, possibly southern Mexico, and in the state of Tennessee. Volcanoes are popping off all over the place, letting us know that Mother Earth is busy detoxing herself in what amounts to a purge. Mount Etna is awake. Yellowstone volcano is making serious noises and spitting stuff. And Mayan volcano is erupting in the Philippines. Even New Mexico is experiencing tremors and some shaking, which is that's unusual for them. So it's time to assess what could happen in your area and be ready. Number 6, the severe heat in England is likely to fuel some very kinetic, Civil War-like activity. Last month or so, I saw people leaving Britain, many going to South America. The heat seems to be the last straw for many of them. And it looks like the exodus is becoming a flood. Keep your cool as the summer unfolds. The fight to rescue Britain is going to get intense. Number 7, I was looking ahead to see the outcome of the Memorandum of Understanding agreed to by President Trump and Masoud Pezeshkian, and what I saw was someone crumpling up the memorandum and tossing it in the wastebasket. That was not very encouraging. This was followed by a lot of shouting and bombastic behavior by a group of men at a table, So earlier, like a week or two earlier, I was asking about the news in July and I saw tanks moving in Europe. So I drew a quick sketch of it along with a few additional observations and thought I would share it here. So the question I asked was, what is in the news in July 2026? And these were things besides the tanks, things happening quickly. There was a feeling of dread everywhere, like something coming that we don't want. Tanks in Europe were moving. I thought they were moving east. In the US, people were still ignoring everything. A lot of people. Troops crossed a river. I wasn't sure where that river was, but I wondered if it was the Dnieper River in Ukraine. Russia was demonized to an extreme. And the question, where's Putin? I could not find Putin. So after watching the tanks and wondering if this was literal or symbolic, there was a shift in my perceptions, kind of like a change of scene in a dream. I was on the patio deck of an apartment building, several floors up, and I was watching a scattered war unfold. I wasn't affected by it, and it even seemed a little unreal, even though I could see bombs, planes, drones, and men fighting to destroy one another. I had a thought that went something like, well, that takes care of the old world. Now we will have to rebuild. The whole vision ended, and I was reminded of something I read recently. It was written by a man who had a dream that he was watching two worlds at the same time. One was full of wars and disasters. The other was full of sunshine and people going about their lives quite normally. He wondered, how was it possible that he could see into two worlds at once? It's possible. And it's possible because everything is consciousness, and we can be aware of more than one thing at a time, especially if we are on a different timeline. A timeline is actually created by the series of perceptions and decisions that we make. Moving to a different timeline requires new perceptions and decisions. But if you just recently kind of woke up and started making new kinds of decisions, there's no guarantee that you will escape the outcomes of the decisions being made by the majority of people around you. The old saying is, the rain falls equally on the just and the unjust. Number 8. Scientists are edging closer to discovering the key to anti-aging and immortality. All sorts of silly approaches have been tried over the years, but this new one, and maybe at least a step in the right direction, they have decided to try reprogramming old cells to make them behave like the younger versions of themselves. The report does not say whether they are using chemicals, proteins, CRISPR techniques, or electrical frequencies to create that new program. But if they continue to research new ways to reprogram cells, you know what? They will eventually eliminate everything except electrical frequencies. Once they get this far, progress will move along a little faster. No chemical, no protein, and no cut and paste technique, no matter how gently or carefully handled, will do what frequencies can accomplish in a hot second. We learned that in the lab, Dr. Levengood's lab, when studying crop circles, those magnificent patterns in wheat fields that demonstrate what frequencies are capable of. The majority of scientists are so used to dealing with physical matter that they have just been unable to recognize that the job would be much easier, less time consuming, less expensive, and far more rewarding if they would learn to think in terms of energies. Managing energies is the key to the future. Number 9, Mitch McConnell had a heart attack on June 14th, 2026, and was taken to the hospital. I did not hear the news for several days. It might have even been close to a week. But when I did hear the news, I decided to tune into him to see how he was. I could not find him in any of the hospitals around DC, so I switched gears a bit to see where is he, and quickly saw that he was out of the body. In fact, I could not find a working body at all. I had the thought, oh, he passed away, and that was it. I thought I had just missed the announcement of his death, and I went on about my life. So it was quite a surprise on Monday, July 6th, when I saw a video by Matt Morse complaining that McConnell had now been in the hospital for 3 weeks and no one had heard any news about his condition. Wow. Matt pointed out that if Mitch had passed away, the law required that they would have to hold a special election to fill his role, unless it was less than 3 months to the next election, which is coming up November 3rd, 2026. So Matt raised the question, is someone trying to pretend McConnell is still alive until August 3rd so that no special election is needed? Complicating McConnell's situation is the fact that his wife, Elaine Chao, left for China 3 days after the heart attack to meet with the vice president of China. She's not an elected official, so what business would she have in meeting with China's vice president? The shenanigans that go on around power in the US and our world are absolutely mind-blowing. Is there anything we can trust these days? We can probably expect to see a clone or a double or a masked double acting as if Mitch is just fine and ready to go back to work. You know, if that turns out to be the case, I think we're going to have to ask ourselves, do we have a real government or not? Number 10, speaking of trust and trusting our government, I was focusing on what's happening in India, and I saw a video that pointed out some important, even inspiring factors that we might borrow and keep in mind. So, India has everything it needs to become a superstar. However, there is something intrinsic to their culture that is a big obstacle. That obstacle is the way they think about hierarchy, tradition, and authority. India calls itself a democracy, but they bow to a caste system. The whole democratic system is organized and operates around the idea that hierarchy and authority are more important than outcomes. But when hierarchy and authority are respected more than competence, incompetence survives far longer than it should. When status is treated as destiny rather than function, entire pools of human talent they go to waste. People at the bottom of the caste system never get a chance to become. When loyalty to an inner circle is treated as the highest virtue, public institutions can never become fair and impartial. When power is personal rather than institutional, law becomes negotiable. Whoever's in power decides what's going to be. Paper becomes power, procedure becomes sacred, Delay becomes the default schedule. The citizen becomes a supplicant rather than an individual with rights, and ends up trying to navigate a labyrinth of signatures, stamps, fees, and middlemen, and even bribes, just to get access to a few basic services. Get this, I'm still blown away by this. There are 54 million pending cases in the Indian court system. 54 million pending cases. Over 180,000 of those cases have been pending for over 30 years. Their oldest pending case was 72 years in limbo. That's not a system that's working. The warning is that when people stop expecting justice, because courts don't work, there's an erosion of trust. Law suffers. What this does to a country over decades is devastating. People turn to their tribe, their family, and hidden networks. They fall back on the caste system. The caste system survives as part of a spiritual architecture that makes inequality seem natural, even holy. When suffering is framed as karma, there's no pressure to change things. If the social order is seen as cosmic and challenging, it feels dangerous. And when duty is considered sacred, challenging it starts to feel like sin. The problem in India is that there are no counterweights built into their system. These would be counterweights such as competence that can be measured, accountability, competition, education, constant improvement, and challenges through courts that actually work. Hierarchy without accountability and uncorrected institutional dysfunction leads directly to decay. Society can survive poverty, it can survive inequality and deep internal division, but it cannot survive the loss of institutional trust. India is caught in 3,000 years of a dysfunctional and unbalanced approach to hierarchy, tradition, and authority. You could almost say they are frozen in time. What's interesting is that when you follow the predictions of the coming pole shift, India ends up at the North Pole. How's that for karma? And refusing to move away from a system frozen in the ruts of tradition. Number 11, a huge disaster occurred in Southeast China when Typhoon Mayak moved across the South China Sea and then parked itself right over the province of Guangxi for 3 days, dropping almost a meter of rain on the land. First, one dam failed, then another dam, and then another and another, until an entire cascade of failing dams sent billions of cubic meters of water rushing through the valleys below. Like the disaster in the Venezuela quakes, it's difficult to get your mind around the damage in Guangxi. The population of Guangxi was around 300,000 people. Thousands are missing. Houses have been washed away. Roads are gone. Communications are out. And food and water are not available. What do we do when the systems we have built cannot stand up against Mother Nature? Number 12. People are still freaking out about AI and jobs. For the last few years, I have watched many things in the old business world become more intrusive, ridiculously complex, and less rewarding. There are a tangle of attitudes making things difficult, and a friend of mine insists that it's an entitlement problem in which people just show up at their job to collect a paycheck, not because they intend to do the work. A family member insists that everyone has suddenly gotten lazy and no one wants to work. Business owners that I know don't trust the help they have, and others can't find good help at all. Good help, quote unquote, good help, includes people who can think, direct themselves, read, write, spell, be courteous and businesslike on the phone, understand how to use a computer, be able to grasp the purpose and basic workings of the business they are working for, and show up. No one seems to care about anything. And too often employees have the attitude that the customer is a nuisance. The result is that everything is breaking down and lots of people are out of work. Small businesses are closing or slowing down to the point where the owner can do most everything himself because he can't find good help. And AI is taking the blame for the fact that people are losing jobs. But how valuable did those people make themselves to their employer? How productive were they? Did they work as if they owned the company and wanted it to succeed? The biggest expense in any business is the money paid to the people who work there. The biggest headache in any business is the people who work there. When those people don't really want to work and can't be counted on to show up regularly, when they only want the paycheck, when they don't understand the business they work for, when they don't get along among themselves or with the customers, business owners are going to embrace AI and robots. It might be a good thing for people to be unemployed for a while. Maybe they will discover something they're really interested in and want to do. After all, a paycheck is no replacement for passion and interest in your work. Many unemployed people might have time to reflect on whether or not they were an asset to the business or a drag on the whole operation. Maybe they will decide to go into business for themselves and discover, they need good help and how difficult it is to find that help. And maybe they'll see their own poor attitudes reflected in the people they hire in desperation. AI is wonderful in many ways, but humans are indispensable. Whatever happens next in the world of business is going to be quite interesting. Number 13, what are we doing here on our planet? Because of wars, protests, economic trouble, or forced immigration, lots of people are suffering. They're suffering in Russia, Ukraine, Iran, Israel, UAE, Lebanon, Syria, Libya, Qatar, Yemen, Bolivia, Ecuador, Cuba, England, Ireland, France, Italy, Austria, Germany, Greece, Norway, and Sweden. People are struggling or dead because of severe flooding in China and Brazil, earthquakes in Venezuela, and severe heat across all of Europe. The Southwest USA, as well as the countries of India, China, South Africa, and Iran, are running out of water and are already experiencing water rationing. South Africa just shut off their taps completely. People are on their own. How much longer can the people of Earth ignore the natural world? For years, we have held the expectation that we're too far advanced. We're beyond famine. We're beyond losing wars. We're beyond having to inconvenience ourselves because of Mother Nature. We set up our lives to create an economic success story rather than a living story of success for all life, including our own. We assume that what we have today is what we're going to have tomorrow. What if we all stopped, looked, and listened to what Mother Nature is telling us? Whether we want to admit it or not, we have a relationship with nature, and we have an obligation to keep up our end of the relationship. We've not done very well with that relationship over the past few decades. Mother Nature, Mother Earth, needs to hear from us, and we need to understand what she is doing. It's becoming a matter of survival. Number 14, this is an out-and-out complaint. I get about a half dozen calls every day from some outfit claiming they are responding to my request for a loan and promising to set me up with a low payment. They use different phone numbers from ordinary citizen phones, so you can't call them back and complain because you get some guy on the other end saying he didn't call and he doesn't have any money to loan. For a while, I hung up on these nuisance calls. Then, tired of the interruptions, I signed on to a do not call list. That was useless. Then I started blocking their calls. Then I started letting them fill up my voicemail in hopes they'd get a message one day saying, "Sorry, the voicemail is full." But suddenly my voicemail has an unlimited ability to handle messages. I continue to delete and report scam. Currently, my junk mail, voicemail, averages about 130 messages at all times. 3 or 4 family members of mine are dealing with the same thing. I want Verizon to do something about the scam calls in the same way the banks now have to stop their fee harvesting. Do we need a Supreme Court of Business to make this harassment stop? Make it illegal? Number 15. Islam is under fire due to falling demographics. For years, Muslim women gave birth to an average of 7 children. Wow. Between the late 1990s and 2010, their birth rate fell over 60%, and it has continued to fall. The Muslim birth rate is now at 1.5 live births per woman, which is far below the replacement rate of 2.9 children. Muslim women are some of the most well-educated women in the world nowadays, and educated women have a tendency to have many fewer children, lots less, in other words. Turkey, Iran, and Iraq have tried to boost the birth rate by banning vasectomies, restricting contraceptives, and closing family planning clinics. Some even pay people to have more children, but marriages have dropped nearly in half, and women are not marrying until their late 20s, almost 30. The Iranian government has called the falling birth rate an existential threat. So has Turkey. They were planning to take over the world by producing humans at a prodigious rate, but that is not likely now. As pointed out in other look-sees, when the birth rate falls below 1.9 live births per woman, it's not reversible. Given the chaos, the war, and the economic confusion of our times, it strikes me as quite sensible to put off having children. It's difficult enough to raise children when times are good. Why bring them into a world of war, corruption, and uncertainty around food and finances? Sometimes I think we people are much wiser than our governments think we are. Number 16. Still on the topic of Islam, I was quite surprised to discover that for years, India had been operating with several different systems of law. There was civil law, but also Muslim personal law, which superseded the country's civil law when it came to marriage, divorce, inheritance, succession, etc. I think there might have been Hindu law operating in there as well, and maybe something else for Sikhs and Christians. And the surprise was, how was India able to function at all? It came to a head when a Muslim man divorced his wife of many years. That was another shock. To divorce his wife, all a Muslim man had to do was say the word talaq, T-A-L-A-Q, talaq 3 times. Talaq, talaq, talaq. And that was it. The divorce was final. She was out. No house, no car, no waiting period, no settlement, no due process, and nowhere to go. Muslim women had no recourse because India's laws did not have any say in the matter. Then one particular woman refused to go quietly into the street. She sued, and she took the case all the way to India's Supreme Court. She said no man should be able to erase a woman's entire life with just a word, and the court agreed. The result was the first crack in the crazy system of religious and civil laws that has been hobbling India for decades. This eventually prompted the state of Uttarakhand to take on the challenge of Indian versus Muslim versus Hindu and whatever other laws, and write the Uniform Civil Code for all of its citizens. The new civil law covered everyone regardless of religion. In March 2024, the president signed it. 2 more states then took up the issue and passed it in 2026. So as we here in the US move into the future, perhaps we should be aware of how far ahead we are in terms of governance. We have had the separation of church and state for 250 years. India is just now getting to the point where they are finally dealing with the issue. What other concepts have we implemented, learned to manage, and demonstrated to the rest of the world? What might we demonstrate to the entire solar system as we move toward the new Earth? I think we need to recognize what we have accomplished and give ourselves a little credit. It hasn't been easy, and things do go wrong, and things do get messy, but we can fix anything we put our minds to. And that's it for this look-see. For those who are watching or listening for the first time, the look-see is a brief look at what's happening in the world and where the big trends are headed. Reality is not fixed. It's dynamic, and it changes according to what we're doing with our consciousness. Nothing becomes real until we make it real. We make a choice, take some kind of action, put something together, or take it apart. Those decisive actions are what determine the outcome and the timeline. Of course, once we set something in motion, it takes a lot to make a change or get things going in another direction. And that's exactly the reason for looking ahead. If we don't like the direction things are going, we can make appropriate changes in a timely way or prepare for what looks inevitable. If we see something we like, we can put some conscious attention on that outcome and sort of, help it along. it is important to look around and assess what is happening, what has changed, where we are going, so we know whether or not we need to do something different. So thank you so much for listening. Keep your eyes open and your wits about you, and hang on to your hats, or maybe I should say your water bottle and your fan as we move into August. See you next month. Take care.